Tonight, as Canadians prepare for back to school and back to work, new warnings about back to COVID.
We can expect to see another increase in COVID-19 transmission.
And ready for your booster? Approval for the shot targeting Omicron is coming tomorrow. Also tonight, new details allege Donald Trump didn't just possess classified documents, they were likely concealed.
Sure seems like outright dishonesty were just never his in the first place.
And the dire student housing crisis on Canadian university campuses.
If they haven't found a place to live, we are saying, please don't come.
This is The National. Good evening, I'm David Common. Adrienne is on assignment. With Labor Day around the corner, Canadians may be turning their attention to the COVID consequences of a return to work and school, especially their booster shots. Tonight, a major development when it comes to vaccines. CBC News has learned that tomorrow, Health Canada will approve a shot from Moderna that targets the Omicron variant. It's known as a bivalent vaccine, and Moderna has already agreed to supply Canada with 12 million doses. The expected approval is well-timed, with cases expected to rise in the coming weeks. Today, Ontario laid out its plan for the fall. Thomas Dagg explains.
Toronto's downtown transit hub is about to get extra crowded as more workers return to the office and students go back to school. With September come those all too familiar questions.
Why are we lowering restrictions? That doesn't make sense.
I'm not really sure what the solution is because, life does need to go on.
For the third straight year, Ontarians are being warned.
As we start spending more time indoors this fall, we can expect to see another increase in COVID-19 transmission.
This time, though, predicting case counts will be harder, official guidance looser. The advice from Ontario's top doctor? Make sure COVID and flu shots are up to date. Wear a mask when appropriate. And here's the big change. Anyone catching COVID is no longer required to isolate.
You should not go back to the school or work environment until your symptoms are resolving and improving for at least 24 hours.
That means office workers may return the day after they start feeling better. That's too soon, say some doctors.
In my view, this will enhance the spread of COVID-19 in school and work environments.
Others point to the bigger picture.
You have a lot of people missing work, and that obviously impacts society, etc. So I think there's a bit of a balancing act here.
With infections set to rise again, hospital capacity remains a concern.
I declare the motion carried.
As a solution, the province approved a plan that could transfer some hospital patients to nursing homes they didn't choose, trading one crisis for another, say critics.
They've named these people now as expendable human beings in the race for ever scarcer resources in our healthcare system.
For now, commuters wait for their train home, dreading COVID's wild ride in the fall.
We all have a level of accountability of keeping each other safe.
Thomas, some in Ontario concerned about dropping isolation requirements for the infected. What's happened elsewhere?
Saskatchewan dropped isolation requirements back in February. New Brunswick and Nova Scotia have done so as well. Here in Ontario, though, although the top doctor is loosening the rules, he's saying some could come back. Like he's pointing, for instance, to mandatory masking for the general public. Remember that? Dr. Kieran Moore says it could come back. He could recommend it if COVID and other respiratory viruses again put a strain on the hospital system, David.
All right, thanks very much. CBC's Thomas Dagg in Toronto. Health officials in Newfoundland and Labrador are reviewing nearly 14,000 mammograms looking for potential errors.
This occurrence appears to have low risk for patients. However, it's important that these images be reread for the safety of any patient that has had a mammogram.
4 regional health authorities are looking at diagnostic images stretching as far back as 2013. Officials say inadequate monitors with lower resolution were used to screen patients for breast cancer. The issue was first revealed last week and is now being expanded to mammogram results from across the province. 3 Ontario police officers each faced 2 criminal charges in the shooting death of a 1-year-old boy. In 2020, officers in Cottage Country were responding to reports a man had abducted his son. 3 officers shot at the man's truck. Last year, the Special Investigations Unit determined the child was shot by police. The growing number of threats to the safety of politicians is raising the question of heavier security. Ashley Burke hears from cabinet ministers who know what it's like to be targeted with a menacing message.
You traitor.
The Deputy Prime Minister berated by a man and cornered into an elevator surrounded by staff. But there are no police with Chrystia Freeland.
Will you be increasing security?
I always follow the advice of the RCMP.
Freeland careful with her words.
What happened was wrong. People who are members of a visible minority and women are perhaps particularly vulnerable.
People of color are tired of bearing the brunt of every single thing. This is a time for people to stand up.
Freeland's incident now raising questions. Should cabinet ministers have dedicated RCMP protective details? The PM doesn't leave home without his, but cabinet ministers don't automatically get that same protection. They have to ask for it if they feel threatened. Some have and received security during the convoy in Ottawa.
The aggressive, bullying, hate-filled tactics of a small number of people is causing us to have to rethink the freedoms that we've had.
MPs can also ask for panic buttons to call police in an emergency. The government is now discussing what more can be done.
Although I do appreciate measures are important, and yes, they provide some level of safety and security, monitoring our homes, for example, with cameras, but at the end of the day, that's not going to be enough.
Some cabinet ministers have openly expressed their pride at having no protective details because they want to be seen as accessible. And so therefore, it is for the RCMP a delicate balance.
Another huge challenge for law enforcement is determining how and when those online threats could be carried out in the real world. In some cases, politicians have to be convinced that those threats could be dangerous. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
One of the ministers you just saw in Ashley's story was moved to a new job in cabinet today.
I, Philomena Tassi, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will...
Philomena Tassi takes on a lower profile role as minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. She asked for the switch because of a family health issue. Her former portfolio, Minister of Public Services and Procurement, goes to Helena Jacek. The U.S. Justice Department says classified documents were likely concealed from agents in the search for government secrets at Donald Trump's estate. It's part of a new court filing, and as Magda Gabricelese explains, it's the clearest look at the investigation so far.
A snapshot of secret and top secret files in former President Donald Trump's Florida home, and new claims that classified documents were being concealed.
The documents are clearly identified, they're sensitive, and the release of them would compromise national security.
This former CIA official says the reason is simple.
Top secret SCI typically refers to intercepted communications. It's hard to get higher in terms of classification than that. If these are revealed to the public and to foreign adversaries, those foreign adversaries will determine how that stuff was intercepted, and they will close down those circuits.
The new information comes from the Department of Justice. This is its response to Trump's request that a third party sift through the evidence the FBI found at his home. Investigators say even after Trump's representatives returned 38 classified documents in June and claimed that's all there was evidence of more. In that early August search, more than 100 classified records were taken away. Now the DOJ says 3 of them were found in Trump's office.
Sure seems like outright dishonesty in resisting giving back documents that were just never his in the first place.
Can we have a word, sir? Trump has questioned the credibility of the search and took aim at the release of that picture of the documents, writing, "Thought they wanted them kept secret. Lucky I declassified," a position amplified on Fox News.
My father-in-law has said that he has declassified, or he did declassify as president,
everything that he took from the Oval Office, that he had a right to have all the documents that he took.
Not so, says the Department of Justice. Meanwhile, Trump's lawyers have responded to the filing, saying sensitive information stored at his home should never have been a cause for alarm. Trump still wants a third party assigned to this case, and the hearing is scheduled for Thursday. Magda Gebrselassie, CBC News, Washington.
Tonight, people in Jackson, Mississippi are scrambling to get their hands on bottled water. The city has lost access to safe water indefinitely after its treatment facility failed. Chris Reyes looks at a system that's been in crisis for years.
Until further notice, the water in Jackson, Mississippi, a city of about 150,000 people, remains unsafe to use.
Right now we have challenges both in terms of quantity of water but also quality of water.
City officials say flooding from heavy rains in recent weeks disrupted their main water plant's processing system. That means either no water or brown water out of the tap, shutting down schools and businesses. Anger from the city's residents.
This is a catastrophic failure that has been, in the works or in the making for quite some time. There's business to be had in this city, but without water, we're kind of, we're handcuffed. We can't do anything.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating to have to fight for some water.
The extreme racist politics that are being played, placing politics before people, it has to stop.
Mississippi has been dealing with a long list of problems with its water system, including sewage overfill and lead. Jackson has been under a boil water notice since July.
This is a set of accumulated problems based on deferred maintenance that has not taken place over decades.
Mississippi is earmarked to receive almost $500 million for water improvements across the state as part of a newly passed federal infrastructure bill. The problem? Some have estimated the cost of fixing the state's crumbling water system at around $2 billion.
I had a call today. I spoke extensively with the president, and I had a separate call with the vice president. Both assured me that the eyes of Washington are watching the city of Jackson.
Crews installed an emergency rental pump at the facility. The National Guard is on the ground. More bottled water supplies are set to arrive after some distribution sites ran out earlier this week. Still, that means the city doesn't have enough water to meet critical needs, and a long-term solution also nowhere in sight. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Help for those struggling with their mental health in this country will soon be just 3 digits away. 988, that is the new number adopted by Canada's broadcast and telecom regulator. The free crisis line will begin operating in November next year. In the meantime, people can call that other number on your screen there, 1-833-456-4566. Now to backlash over a new federal luxury tax set to take effect tomorrow on high-end boats, cars, and planes. The government says the goal of the tax is to make the wealthiest pay their fair share. But as Peter Cowan shows us, Canadians who build and sell boats say they're unfairly paying the price.
This thing is built for the family for the whole weekend.
This top-of-the-line fishing boat comes with a top-of-the-line price, about $500,000 fully loaded, plus tax. And starting this week, a new luxury tax will add up to 10% to that price.
We've had a couple of cancellations already on our big boats.
It's not just the tax. Inflation has driven up the price of raw materials and labor.
We've experienced about a 30% increase across the board in price increases. It's becoming a pricey endeavor going out in the ocean, having some fun with your family.
But if you can afford a boat like this, the federal finance minister says you can afford to contribute more.
People who are doing really, really well should feel comfortable supporting everybody else.
It's not just boats. New planes and cars worth more than $100,000 are also facing the new tax. It's expected to bring in between $140 to $165 million.
The scheme of the overall finances of the government of Canada, $163 million, doesn't even qualify as rounding error.
This former federal finance official says the tax doesn't make sense, especially when it leaves out other luxuries like expensive jewels, big RVs, or pricey cottages. He says if the government wants the rich to pay more, they can increase the income tax.
I don't know what the logic is of a luxury tax. It comes from a populist notion to somehow ding the wealthy. But we already do that. We have a progressive income tax system.
Mark Delaney says he's worried his workers will be the real ones to pay for this tax if the orders dry up and he has to lay people off.
There's going to be some pain here to go through.
The United States introduced a similar luxury tax in 1991. Less than 2 years later, it was scrapped after it cost tens of thousands of jobs. The boating industry in this country is hoping the government learns the lesson there and scraps the tax here. Peter Cowan, CBC News, Ottawa.
We have new data tonight showing signs of potential slowing in the Canadian economy. Statistics Canada says it grew by 3.3% in the second quarter. That's weaker than expected. While real GDP grew by 0.1% in June, early data shows it shrank by that same amount in July. The Bank of Canada is widely expected to announce another interest rate hike next week to try to tame inflation. There's a much rosier economic picture being painted tonight in Alberta thanks to a spike in oil and gas revenues. The province is on track for a $13 billion surplus this year. Alison Dempster now on the different ideas on what to do with it.
I think that this province is headed in the right direction and Albertans are very, very excited.
It's an enviable position for any finance minister.
I'm announcing today an over $13 billion surplus. The largest investments in the Heritage Saving Trust Fund in our history, paying down all of our short-term debt this year.
That means nearly $2 billion for the province's rainy day fund. Hundreds of millions more will go to an income tax break, but no extra help for seniors and those on social assistance.
Where we have record revenues coming in, where we have billions in surplus, and this government is allowing children and seniors and disabled Albertans to continue to struggle to pay for food.
Albertans are mixed on what to do with the rest of the gusher of cash.
I think investing in education, investing in local community so that our kids can have, playgrounds to play in, parks like this.
Well, I think really we've got still quite a bit of an overall debt, so they'll probably have to pay that off a little bit.
The basics, housing and nourishment are, in my mind, forefront.
Economists warn continuing to rely on resource revenue is risky.
Here we are at the top of the roller coaster. We've been at the bottom for a few years. Now we're at the top. What we do now is really important for how we deal with the eventual fall back to the bottom of the roller coaster.
The current surplus is not a major talking point in the United Conservative Party leadership campaign. At a debate last night, much of the focus was on Alberta's sovereignty and federal grievances.
You see what Ottawa does to us? They invade our jurisdiction time and time and time again.
We can't wave a magic wand and get rid of federal law. That is simply a fallacy.
The province's bullish economy may not be getting much traction in the UCP leadership race, but the winner will inherit a rosy forecast, something they might find helpful in the provincial election next spring. Alison Dempster, CBC News, Calgary.
Several universities are preparing for a full return to campus this fall, but what's supposed to be an exciting time for students is turning into a nightmare for some. They're scrambling to find a place to live. Susanna Da Silva now on the student housing crunch.
In the past month, I've contacted 65 plus places. I've only ever received responses from a few.
And most of the responses weren't actually options.
$1,400 a month, and I thought it was like a shared bill until I contacted to confirm that price with the seller, and he's like, yeah, it's $1,400 single person.
A price this UBC grad student who just arrived from India working and saving to cover her tuition can't afford.
It's just been very anxiety-inducing and stressful.
She, like many students, even placed a dating-like post with her picture, basic details, and qualities on Facebook housing groups, hoping a landlord off campus would be a match. UBC has a 5,000-person waitlist for on-campus housing, and the shortage is not just in extreme housing markets like Vancouver and Toronto.
We were kind of like eager to find a plan B.
The University of Moncton had to put a call out trying to help 120 students with nowhere to go.
We had already 37 rooms that were available after that launch that we did. So the community has responded.
At the University of PEI, a more extreme message.
If they haven't found a place to live, we are saying, please don't come, please defer, come in the winter, come next fall.
Experts say with students taking online classes from home during the pandemic, many landlords were forced to look for other kinds of tenants, while other properties were sold to take advantage of high real estate prices.
So we've got an increased number of students coming in with a decreased amount of traditional student housing available. And the two of them, put together to cause this crisis that's happening now.
This website connects students and landlords. Some schools are offering to cover the fee landlords pay to post, while new housing developments are in the works at others. UBC says it already has more housing than any other school. Chavi Mahera finally found an affordable place with roommates she has met.
It's definitely one less thing on my plate.
But for many others with days to go, it's still a worry. Susanna Da Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
Millions pay tribute to the People's Princess 25 years after her death.
Prince Diana shared things with people. We want the same thing. We want to share with people.
Yeah.
But a move by Meghan Markle has some crying foul. And a CBC News investigation reveals some doctors received government support and billed millions.
The purpose of CEWS is to make you whole. It is not to transfer taxpayer money to a windfall.
And stumbling on a piece of ancient history in Alberta.
So what do we have here? This is a sample of fossilized skin of a hadrosaur or duck-billed dinosaur.
We're back in 2. There are new concerns tonight about Europe's energy supply after Russia once again shut down the critical Nord Stream 1 pipeline. The state-owned Gazprom says the 3-day shutdown was needed for maintenance, but there are concerns Russia is actually using energy supplies as a weapon of war. Princess Diana's death 25 years ago tonight stunned the world and united people in grief. A tragedy seared into the minds of the more than 2 billion viewers who later tuned in to watch her funeral. Chris Brown now on how Diana's legacy lives on.
Diana's death a quarter-century ago was a seismic event for Great Britain and its monarchy.
25 years she's been gone and people still remembering her every day, like myself. I came here in 1997 when all the flowers were everywhere.
Outside her former home, Kensington Palace, some fans shared a cake in her honor.
Prince Diana shared things with people. We want the same thing. We want to share with people.
Yeah.
Some of these tributes are quite lengthy and also very personal, touching on her sons William and Harry will watch over your sons, their wives, and your grandchildren, and your family. And this one here, your light shines through in the faces of your children and your grandchildren. There was a memorial in Paris too, outside the tunnel where her limo slammed into a concrete pillar at high speed. Diana, who was 36, died a short time later in hospital.
She made you feel like you mattered.
Diana's legacy is especially poignant for Tessie Ojo, who administers the Diana Awards for young people who demonstrate compassion for others.
I remember vividly watching her, for someone of color, watching her hold this little girl who I think she had AIDS or her parents had AIDS. Nobody else in her position had ever happened. And for me, I was that little girl. And suddenly, you were visible to her.
Just as Diana was notoriously mistreated by other royals, her sons, William and Harry, have fallen out over the allegedly poor treatment of Harry's wife, Meghan.
People should expect the real me in this, and probably the me that they've never gotten to know.
Controversially, Meghan just launched her new podcast, knowing the focus would be on Diana, says this royal watcher.
She is married to Prince Harry, and it is part of his legacy, but I think that the timing could have been different.
The soap opera over her sons and her ex-husband and future king, Charles, keeps Diana's name in the news, but people here say the example she set helping others is why her legacy endures. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
A CBC News investigation uncovers that hundreds of doctors received government pandemic support, but there are questions about why some received it despite billing millions. And
children may be less fit as a result of being less active.
As kids return to school, we revisit the impact of online learning on their physical health. That's next. More than 2 years into the pandemic, billions of dollars have been spent by the federal government to support struggling business owners. Our investigative team has been tracking those funds, including a look at doctors who received them. Senior data journalist Valerie Willette is here to show us what they found.
We wanted to put numbers on just how difficult this pandemic has been for doctors from a financial perspective. So we dug into the billings of 58,000 doctors paid by provincial health insurance. And what we found is really a story of two pandemics. One where the majority of doctors saw significant drops in their billings, and another where a smaller group of higher billing doctors, most of them specialists, had a much better year, some even benefiting from COVID emergency funding. According to our CBC News analysis, in the first year of the pandemic, 1 in 4 Canadian doctors saw their billings drop by 20% or more, significantly higher than in the previous year.
The healthcare system's not very well organized.
This family doctor isn't surprised. He says many clinics scrambled to stay open through repeated lockdowns.
People need to remember right back at the beginning of the pandemic, things were really shut down hard. And so for example, I'm in family medicine. Our visits dropped just like a rock down to, maybe 10, 20% of the people we would normally see.
But not all doctors. We looked at 600 of Canada's highest paid, most of them specialists, billing between $1 and $6 million a year. Just 7% saw that same dramatic reduction, and many billed more than before. We also found 1 in 4 of them received money from Canada's Emergency Fund for Business Owners.
I would imagine with the kind of billings that those top earners have, that they're running a large clinic with a large staff and probably a lot of overhead costs and other things as well. So if CEWS allowed them to maintain that so they could bounce back faster, they would be in a better position to kind of pick up that work.
They're still potentially on the hook.
This business ethics professor says the doctors should give that money back.
The purpose of CEWS is to make you whole. It is not to transfer taxpayer money to a windfall.
Now, Valerie, you've reached out to some of these top doctors. What do they have to say?
Well, one important thing to point out here is that nobody is suggesting that this funding is illegal or broke the rules. But still, we reached out to a number of these doctors to find out their point of view, have more context, and 2 of them got back to us. One is a Manitoba ophthalmologist who billed $3 million in 2020, and he told us that he used part of the funding to support his 10 employees, and that when the restrictions were lifted in his province, he was swamped by patients and eventually decided to pay back this funding in full. The question now becomes whether other doctors will follow suit.
Valerie Willette, thank you. Students are about to enter a 4th school year under COVID, and we've learned a lot about the high costs they pay. In our special series, Learning Curve, which we rolled out earlier this summer, Deanna Sumanak-Johnson showed us the effects of delayed physical education.
The activities they're trying out are new, but they bring back the familiar joy of moving around with friends, something kids haven't had a lot of since the pandemic began.
Yeah, I did stuff by myself and with my family. We'd go on bike rides and stuff, but I wouldn't see my friends. We wouldn't go play basketball with my friends. Parks were closed, everything. So it took a toll on me when I couldn't do it.
I do feel a change. Well, other than feeling more active than I was during online, I feel I have a better state of mind.
While lags in math and literacy as a result of the pandemic disruptions to learning have garnered much attention, the potential lag in kids' physical activity isn't talked about as much. Screen time and sedentary lifestyle were already big problems before the pandemic. But according to a study, once the pandemic broke out, only 3% of Canadian kids met the guidelines on movement, screen time, and sleep. After the kids returned to in-person schooling, that figure rose, but only slightly, to between 5 and 6%.
The physical inactivity and increased screen time should really be considered a collateral consequence of the pandemic for these kids. And children may be less fit as a result of being less active. They may also be experiencing higher levels of depression and anxiety as a result of the pandemic.
The remedy, experts say, is both at home and at school. This Toronto school has resumed its popular Spring Wellness Week with new activities like juggling and learning to play cricket.
So cricket has both the physical element of it, running, catching, fielding. The one additional element that the cricket brings is the strategy.
And there's a strategy experts recommend for families too. Build in unstructured, fun activities like taking a walk after dinner or biking, as the slow crawl out of the pandemic hopefully builds to a speedier jog. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada promised to bring in thousands of Afghan refugees, but over the summer, many were still left in limbo.
Do you think the Taliban would kill you if they found you?
Yeah, because I work with the Canadian armies.
Now the door is closing on those who never made it to Canada. We'll tell you why next. Now for an update on a big promise by the federal government. This month marked 1 year since the fall of Kabul and the government's pledge to resettle 40,000 Afghans, especially those who helped during Canada's mission there. Earlier this year, Paul Hunter met one of the lucky ones and showed us why those who are still left behind can't afford to wait.
10,000 kilometers from Kabul, in a park in the suburbs of Ottawa, Farouk Samim and daughter Rayhan are home. Samim still thinks often of where he grew up, Afghanistan, and as well, those now left behind.
You see the stories and the number of people harmed and detained and killed just because they worked with the previous government, or they worked with NATO, or they worked with Canadians and other NATO allies. This is, heartbreaking.
I will give you a hug.
Agreed, says friend Dan Demers.
These were people who probably, their lives were at risk. They were certainly under threat of being imprisoned possibly tortured, possibly killed.
The two met through their daughters, classmates at school. Now, Demers and Samim have teamed up to help Afghans desperate to escape the Taliban. Some years ago, Samim himself wanted out. In the early 2000s in Afghanistan, his job was to help Western reporters cover the war. His good work was so renowned, it was adapted as a minor character in the film Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, a comedy drama starring Tina Fey. Samim's character is her translator.
She says, welcome to Afghanistan.
In real life, Samim did that and more, working as well with Western fighters, including, after moving to Canada in 2009, helping Canadian soldiers have a better understanding of Afghan culture.
I provided cultural and media training to help the international allied soldiers to be effective in their military operations as well as their peacekeeping intentions and operations.
All of it precisely the kind of thing the Taliban, who now control Afghanistan, despise.
They just look at me or people like me as traitors and working for the Westerners, for Americans or Canadians against them.
Last year, Canada promised to help, pledging safe refuge here for 40,000 Afghans, not least those who helped Canadian troops in the war. 10 months later, a little more than 13,000 are in Canada. We made contact with one of the many thousands more who are still waiting for Canada's promise to be fulfilled.
Did you put your life in danger by working for the Canadian forces?
Yeah.
That's the voice of Bahadur Akhda, who, during the war, stood guard for Canadian troops in Kandahar City at a compound Canada used for training Afghan soldiers. Because he protected Canadians back then, Akhda is now targeted by the Taliban. We reached him in hiding.
What has happened with your family since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan?
The Taliban killed my wife. He was killed on the road. Yeah.
Do you think the Taliban would kill you if they found you?
Yeah. Because I work with the Canadian armies, he said, you are a Canadian too. I'm not safe because the Taliban is searching home by home.
Akhda has been waiting months for paperwork from Canada that would get him to safety.
While I appreciate the commitment of Honorable Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to bring 40,000 Afghans, it's too slow.
Samim is not alone in that concern. Remember Whiskey Tango Foxtrot? Well, the real-life journalist, as played by Tina Fey, is Kim Barker. In 2003, she was a reporter for the Chicago Tribune and worked closely with Samim. Now, worried for Afghans desperate for help amid ever-shifting priorities for those who said they'd give it.
We make a lot of promises, and in the heat of the moment, we say we're going to do certain things. And when I say we, I mean Western governments. And then, you know, the news media goes away and everybody goes away, and the next crisis comes along, and now it's Ukraine.
She underlines, Ukrainian refugees need help, but so too do Afghans. And so it was that when Kabul fell last summer, Barker heard from her old friend Samim in Ottawa. And absent government help, Barker, Samim, Demers, and others in Ottawa and the U.S. acted. Together helping to raise more than $1 million to airlift out some 800 Afghans, including Samim's extended family, also at risk, now with him in Ottawa.
The government was either busy doing other things or just not able to respond in the sort of timely fashion that we needed. These are people in crisis.
In an email, Canada's Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Department told CBC News, "This is a multi-year commitment, and every step of the way there are obstacles facing us in Afghanistan. There's no lack of effort on the part of the Government of Canada." Barker applauds all that's now offered to those in need from Ukraine, but, she says,
you wonder about these old obligations. I don't know what's going to happen.
What is your message to the Prime Minister of Canada?
I'm waiting for you. It is very big problem. All the night I'm not sleeping, just sleeping 1 hour, 2 hours, because I'm looking when the Taliban is coming.
In the time after we spoke with Agha, he managed to make his way to Pakistan, but without any help from Canada. Terrified the Taliban would still find him as he waited for that paperwork.
I want to come to Canada with my family. Just we need this thing. My heart is broke, sir.
In the end, Agha's paperwork finally did make it. The delays from Canada meant it took him nearly 9 months, but he landed in Saskatoon a few days ago. Over in the Ottawa suburbs, Samim recently heard the different fate of another man, one of countless he'd been trying to help get out of Afghanistan. The brother of a female judge in that country a few days ago, killed by the Taliban's relentless brutality. Samim himself is, of course, safe in Canada, but he's also learned that not long ago the Taliban raided his own family's home in Kabul twice. Still on the hunt.
And since we first aired that piece, David, Bahadur Agha and his family have found a place to live and a school for his kids in Saskatoon. He tells us he's very grateful for the new life Canada has given him. That said, some in his extended family are still on the run and in hiding in Afghanistan. As he put it to us recently, they're afraid for their lives.
And Paul, unfortunately, not alone in that circumstance.
They are not. When our piece first aired in May, David, Canada had allowed about 13,000 Afghans into the country since the Taliban took over. Well, that number's now grown to more than 17,000. But Canada is now ending one of the programs that brought them here, the one for Afghans like Agha, who helped Canadian soldiers. And critics say it's left many, even some of those with paperwork already in progress, in a kind of limbo, not knowing when or how they'll get here. It's a very complicated process all round. But the bottom line is that for now, many who helped Canada, including Agha's own brothers, remain in the dark in Afghanistan, hunted by the Taliban.
Paul Hunter, thank you. After the break, an unusual prehistoric discovery.
If I was to find this in Scotland or England, it would go straight to the museum.
Beyond the bones, why paleontologists are excited about this rare dinosaur find. And the surprise pop-up for a group out fishing. Stay with us. Paleontologists in Alberta are excited about a rare find. Every summer, bone hunters from around the world come to Alberta's Badlands, home to one of the best dinosaur bone deposits on the planet. But what they're buzzed about now is dinosaur skin. Aaron Collins joined them on their dig to find out why that's so significant.
If you're on the hunt for dino bones, this is the spot. It's what brought these bone hunters to the area, part of a paleontology field school. They stumbled upon the find of a lifetime.
So you come around this corner, and what do you see?
Well, we see some bones just kind of sticking out of the cliff, and then I turned to Brian and I'm like, what do you think this is? And it turns out that it was something really cool.
Those bones from a young hadrosaur, so common in these parts they were known as the cattle of the Cretaceous period. And what makes this find so cool, millions of years after this dino died, skin still clings to its bones.
So what do we have here?
This is a sample of fossilized skin of a hadrosaur or duck-billed dinosaur.
Okay, so dinosaur skin, why do we care about that?
We care about it because normally when we find dinosaurs, we just have the skeleton. We don't have we only have the bones, we don't have the skin, we don't have the details of the anatomy. So having the skin really fleshes out the animal literally, and we can learn a lot more about the anatomy.
After the find, the heavy work begins. These fossils are just one of hundreds of major discoveries made in the area. A bone boom of sorts helping the world learn more about dinosaurs.
Fossils in Alberta are considered historical artifacts. They can't be publicly owned. They're owned by the province and they're available for scientific research.
As work is underway to unearth one dinosaur, another find just meters away.
You found another one. What does that say about this area when it comes to the number of bones here?
So this is crazy. We're having our interview and we see part of a hadrosaur skull here. It's a post-orbital bone. If I was to find this in Scotland or England, it would go straight to the museum.
But not here. These bone hunters are after a bigger prize, one that will take time to bag. It takes years to get a skeleton out of the ground and into a museum. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Dinosaur Provincial Park, Alberta.
Coming up, a group of friends had a whale of a time this weekend.
Colin, did you crap your pants just now?
You might call it a close encounter of the orca kind in our moments.
I've never seen something so amazing.
A group of 5 friends got quite the surprise while they were swimming and spearfishing off the coast of BC's Quadra Island. A pod of 4 killer whales were not shy, coming real close to the swimmers. The stunning orca appearance is our moment.
I didn't think they were going to come that close. They definitely seemed very curious. I've never seen something so amazing. They definitely wanted to check us out, that's for sure. It was pretty cool. We kind of went for a walk around the beach and then actually saw some blows, like the orcas probably quite far out in the middle of the ocean. We got our binoculars out and could see their fins. And then probably a half an hour after that, they actually came into the bay where we were and came right up to the edge of the water. When Callum was in the water, they wanted to see what he was doing. Yeah, they were probably about 2 to 3 feet like away from Callum. This is amazing. And then they swung around to us and went sideways into the water and like stuck their eyes out up towards us to check us out as well. Callum, did you crap your pants just now? They're very smart mammals and yeah, like we just need to respect them and they'll respect us.
Nicely said, and very cool. So the story on that pod is that it's 2 sisters. They were the ones who were the closest to the group there. An adult son and the mom, and they were just out tooling around. What did I see this weekend? A raccoon and a skunk, so not quite as cool. That is The National for August 31st. Have a great night.